The mechanisms that build an organization's massive success are often the precise triggers for its downfall. An operation gains momentum, it scales, it dominates its market, and then, right at the peak of its efficiency, it starts to fracture. Management scholar Moshe Farjan calls this the dialectic of performance. This is a framework where success breeds momentum, but unchecked success inevitably generates hubris and blind spots. You can see the wreckage of this paradox across the corporate landscape. Take BlackBerry and Nokia, or Kodak and Blockbuster. They all dominated their respective industries before collapsing entirely. Survival in a disruptive market requires a ruthless calculation. You simply have to cannibalize your own highly profitable legacy business before a competitor does it for you. This chart illustrates Jim Collins' 5 stages of decline. Corporate collapse is almost never a sudden death. It is a systemic disease with symptoms visible long before bankruptcy. It begins here, at stage 1. Collins defines stage 1 as hubris born of success. Past victories insulate leadership. They start relying on the rhetoric of success rather than maintaining a penetrating understanding of what makes their products work, completely blinding them to new technological realities. By diagnosing these 5 stages in failed giants, we can reverse engineer the exact strategic pivots required to survive technological disruption. In 2007, the mobile industry was defined by physical buttons and durable plastic. The classic blue Nokia phone was the global standard. At that time, Nokia was earning more than 50. Apple and Android took a completely different approach. They treated the phone as a software platform, a blank slate for an app ecosystem. This trap, clinging to past investments, is known as the sunk cost trap. Microsoft's early entry into the smartphone market illustrates exactly how lethal this can be. Microsoft spent billions of dollars building the Windows Phone operating system. They spent billions more acquiring Nokia's physical handset business, trying to buy their way into hardware dominance. Even as consumer adoption flatlined, Microsoft refused to cut their losses and pivot. They kept doubling down because of the capital they had already deployed. The final bill for refusing to pivot was $7.6 billion. In the technology sector, failing to acknowledge the shift from physical hardware to a software ecosystem is a lethal strategic error. When companies ignore these shifts, they enter stage 3, denial of risk and peril. Here, strong external revenue masks mounting internal warning signs. Sharon Watkins, the whistleblower who exposed the massive accounting fraud at Enron, uses an analogy to explain the psychology of this denial. If you throw a frog into boiling water, it jumps out immediately. But if you place it in cool, slowly heated water, it rationalizes the gradual temperature change. It stays in the pot until it boils to death. Look at Blockbuster. At their peak, they operated 9,000 physical stores and served 65 million registered customers. Blockbuster rationalized the threat of digital streaming because they were addicted to the massive, slow-boiling revenue generated by late fees. They partnered with Enron to develop video on demand in the late 90s, but abandoned it to protect their retail profits. Netflix, on the other hand, aggressively transitioned away from physical media. They willingly obsoleted their own highly successful DVD by mail service to capture the streaming market. Kodak provides an even starker example. They actually invented the consumer digital camera in 1975. But Kodak suppressed their own digital invention. They maintained the belief that customers would always value printed images, choosing to protect their highly profitable physical film business rather than commercializing the new technology. Stage 3 denial destroys companies when executives discount negative data and rely on the false assumption that consumer behavior will never change. Eventually, reality sets in. This triggers stage 4, grasping for salvation. Failing companies make panicked, reactive moves, hunting for a silver bullet acquisition or untested strategy, rather than executing systemic shifts. This chart shows the timeline of stage 4. At this point, a company's path splits. They either capitulate to death, stage 5, joining the ranks of Yahoo, Borders, and Sears, or they execute an agonizing strategic turnaround. A successful turnaround requires a pivot. A pivot is a strategic, proactive shift in the business model to adapt to market demands. While Kodak died clinging to film, their rival Fujifilm survived by pivoting their chemical expertise into commercial and digital printing. In the early 1990s, IBM faced a similar existential crisis. Demand for their massive mainframe computers crashed, and internal bureaucracy paralyzed their ability to respond. In 1993, the board hired Louis Gerstner as CEO and tasked him with executing a complete turnaround. Gerstner executed a step-by-step pivot. He shifted the culture to a customer-centric approach, empowered line executives, unified the marketing under a single brand, and abandoned IBM's physical dominance to focus on the growing market for network-centric computing. Adobe executed a similar transformation. They stopped selling physical, boxed software and moved entirely to a software-as-a-service model. Software-as-a-service, or SaaS, is a delivery method where users pay a recurring subscription to access software hosted in the cloud. To make this work, Adobe obsessed over the day zero experience. This ensures that the moment a user opens the digital product, it is immediately obvious how to use it and extract value from it. Microsoft ultimately recovered when Satya Nadella took over as CEO. He absorbed the $7.6 billion smartphone failure and established a strict mobile-first, cloud-first philosophy, pivoting the company's entire focus away from local hardware. A successful pivot is not a silver bullet. It is the agonizing, methodical process of dismantling a highly profitable airplane mid-flight to build a better one. Technology companies do not die because they lack resources, patents, or capital. They die from a lack of strategic imagination. This diagram compares the mechanics of failure against survival. On the left, hardware focus and ignored data. On the right, software ecosystems and customer experience. Fiercely protecting legacy revenue guarantees a disruptor will steal it. The alternative is a willingness to pivot. We saw this with retail giants like Borders bookstores. Their massive physical empires, once their greatest asset, became a fatal liability in the digital age. To survive disruption, a company must possess the courage to cannibalize its own legacy products before competitors do. Hesitation to modernize is the ultimate competitive threat.